My name is Elena Ramirez, and if you'd asked me a week before Hurricane Marco slammed into the Florida coast, I would have told you I was just another 64-year-old widow living out her quiet years in a double-wide trailer in Sunny Shores Mobile Home Park, a half-hour south of Miami. The place wasn't glamorous, no gated golf community, no ocean view balcony, but it was home. Palm fronds rustled against the chain-link fence, the air always carried a faint tang of salt from Biscayne Bay, and every evening the ibises would parade across the grass like they owned the joint. I liked the routine. Wake up at 6:30, make café con leche strong enough to wake the dead, sit on the screened lanai with my Bible and watch the world wake up. Simple. Mine. The trailer itself was a 1988 Fleetwood Crest. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, linoleum floors worn soft from decades of footsteps. Miguel and I bought it in 1989, right after he started operating cranes down at the Port of Miami. We raised our only son, Carlos, in those tight walls. He learned to ride a bike on the cracked asphalt loop that circled the park, caught his first fish off the little wooden dock over the drainage canal, called every gray-haired neighbor Theo or Thea. Back then, the place felt full of laughter, of arroz con pollo simmering on the stove, of Miguel's deep voice singing old salsa tunes while he fixed whatever needed fixing. Miguel's been gone 8 years now. Pancreatic cancer took him fast and cruel. I nursed him right here in the master bedroom, holding his hand while the hospice nurse came and went. After the funeral, I thought about selling, moving somewhere smaller, maybe an apartment up in Broward. But every corner held a memory. The pencil marks on the kitchen door frame tracking Carlos's growth, the spot on the living room carpet where Miguel proposed on one knee with a ring he saved 6 months for. So I stayed, paid the lot rent, kept the place tidy, told myself I was fine alone. Then came Marco. The forecasts started soft, tropical depression forming off the Leeward Islands. By Tuesday, it was a named storm. Wednesday, Category 2. Thursday night, the cone tightened right over us. Mandatory evacuation for low-lying zones. Sunny Shores sat in Zone C, voluntary. Most folks hitched up their trucks and headed north to relatives in Orlando or Tampa, or booked cheap motels inland. I watched them go from my lanai, waving like it was just another weekend trip. "Stay safe, Elena," Mrs. Delgado called from her minivan. I waved back, smiled, but my stomach twisted. I stayed because I was tired. Tired of running, tired of starting over, tired of asking for help. Besides, I had ridden out Andrew in '92, boarded the windows with plywood Miguel cut himself, stocked candles and Spam, prayed through the howling night. We came through with a leaky roof and no power for 2 weeks, but we came through. How much worse could one more storm be? Friday, the sky turned an ugly, bruised green. Wind picked up around noon, rattling the aluminum siding. By dusk, the rain came horizontal, stinging like needles. Power flickered out at 9:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because the digital clock on the microwave died mid-blink. I lit 2 kerosene lanterns, wrapped myself in the afghan my mother crocheted before she passed, and settled on the couch with a flashlight and my phone. The Weather Channel app showed the eye wall still hours away. Around 1:30 a.m., the real screaming started. Wind tore at the trailer like it wanted to peel it open. Something heavy, maybe a piece of someone's fence, slammed the sidewall hard enough to make the whole thing shudder. I stood up, heart hammering. Water began seeping under the front door, dark and cold. I grabbed towels, shoved them against the threshold. It didn't help. The surge pushed in faster, ankle deep, then shin deep. I waded to the bedroom, snatched my purse, my phone, the old photo album I kept on the nightstand. The pages were already curling from humidity. Glass shattered in the kitchen, a window gone. Rain blasted inside, soaking the curtains, the couch, everything. I yelled Miguel's name without thinking. "Miguel, Dios mío!" Like he could somehow appear and make it stop. The trailer groaned, tilted slightly. I stumbled toward the back door, but water was knee-high now, black and oily with who knows what. My shoes floated away. I grabbed the doorframe, pulled myself up, yanked the door open. Outside was chaos. Neighbors' trailers leaned like drunks. One had flipped onto its side. Power lines sparked in the floodwater. I stepped out into waist-deep surge, clutching the album to my chest like a shield. The current tugged at my legs. I waded to higher ground, the little rise where the mailboxes stood, coughing from the wind-whipped rain. Sat on the curb under a flickering streetlight that somehow still worked. By first light, the water dropped enough to reveal the damage. My trailer was gutted. Roof peeled back like a sardine can, walls sagging, mold already blackening the corners. My Honda Civic sat drowned in the driveway, hood submerged. The album, my lifeline, was soaked through. Ink ran in dark rivers across Miguel's face, Carlos's baby smile, our wedding day. I sat there in borrowed Red Cross blankets, shivering, watching firefighters and volunteers pick through the wreckage. Mrs. Delgado found me, hugged me tight, smelling of wet dog and relief. "You're alive, mija. That's what matters." But everything else was gone. The Red Cross shelter at Homestead Senior High was clean but crowded. Cots in the gym, crying toddlers, the smell of bleach and instant coffee. I stayed 3 nights, ate peanut butter sandwiches, listened to stories worse than mine. Then I couldn't take the noise anymore. I needed quiet to think, to breathe. I called Carlos from a borrowed charger. "Ma, you okay?" His voice sounded far away, distracted. "The trailer's gone, mijo. Total loss. I got out with my purse and 1 bag." "Jesus, you hurt?" "Scrapes. Lungs hurt from the stink, but I'm breathing." A long pause. I could picture him in his glass-walled condo looking out over Orlando traffic. "Ma, our place is small. 2 bedrooms. The girls have 1, Sophia's got her office in the other. We're both working remote now. It's crazy here." "Just for a little while," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "Until FEMA or insurance?" "Ma, the association has strict rules about long-term guests, and honestly, it's not the best time." I closed my eyes. "So what do I do?" "There's extended stay hotels. I can Venmo you a few hundred to cover a week or 2. A few hundred? Like I was some cousin he barely knew. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I slept in the Civic, windows cracked, mosquitoes buzzing, back screaming from the reclined seat. I cried until my throat burned. Then, digging for tissues in my purse, my fingers brushed an old envelope, edges soft from years in the wallet. Inside, 1 sheet of lined paper, postmarked 1995. "Dear Elena, if you're ever in real trouble, call. I mean every word. You're the strongest woman I ever knew. Miguel was lucky to have you. So was I, to call you both friends. Always, Jack Harlan, P.O. Box 478, Fredericksburg, TX, 786244, 830-555-0192. Jack Harlan, Miguel's best man, Vietnam brother, the man who carried Miguel off a rice paddy when he took shrapnel, who stood at our wedding in his dress uniform grinning like he'd won the lottery, who sent cards every Christmas until life got busy and the cards stopped. I stared at the number. 40 years. What right did I have? But I had no one else. I borrowed a volunteer's phone, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. It rang 4 times. Then that deep Texas draw, warm as sun on limestone. Hannah Harlan Ranch. "Jack, it's Elena Ramirez." A breath, then soft and wondering. "Elena? Sweet Lord, you finally called." Tears spilled before I could stop them. "Jack, my home, the Hurricane. Carlos won't take me in. I'm sleeping in my car. I don't know what else to do." "Where exactly are you right now?" "Homestead, outside the high school shelter." "Give me the intersection. I'm on my way." "You can't. It's halfway across the country." "Truck's already running. Tell me the cross streets." I gave them, hung up, sat on the curb, staring at nothing. 2 days later, a dusty black Ford Expedition pulled into the lot. A tall man in faded denim and a weathered Stetson stepped out, gray hair now, but those same steady blue eyes that once stared down death in a jungle. He saw me on the curb with my single duffel bag, didn't speak first, just walked over, knelt in the grit, and wrapped me in arms that still remembered how to hold someone who was breaking. Then 3 words, quiet as a prayer: "You're still my hero." I collapsed against him and sobbed like the world had ended all over again. But maybe, just maybe, it was only beginning. Chapter 2: The Long Road Home. The moment Jack Harlan knelt in that gritty parking lot outside the homestead shelter and said those 3 words, "You're still my hero," something inside me cracked wide open. Not just tears, but years of holding it together. The double shifts at the hospital after Miguel died, the lonely nights in the trailer, the quiet ache of watching Carlos build a life that didn't seem to have room for me anymore. I sobbed into his denim jacket, the fabric smelling faintly of cedar shavings and motor oil, like a working man's comfort. He didn't shush me or pull away, he just held on, one big hand steady on my back, letting me fall apart until there was nothing left but ragged breaths and the distant hum of I-95 traffic. When I finally pulled back, wiping my face with the sleeve of my borrowed sweatshirt, he studied me with those calm blue eyes. Lines deeper now, hair more salt than pepper under the Stetson, but still the same Jack who'd once carried Miguel 2 miles through monsoon mud to a medevac chopper. "You look like hell, Elena," he said, a small half-smile tugging his mouth, "but you're still beautiful." I laughed, shaky, surprised. "Liar, I haven't slept right in days, and I smell like wet dog and Red Cross bleach." "Still beautiful," he repeated, like it was fact. Then he stood, offered his hand, and helped me up. "Come on, let's get you out of this parking lot." He loaded my duffel into the back of the black Ford Expedition like it weighed nothing. The SUV was clean but lived in. Coffee thermos in the cup holder, a worn Bible on the passenger seat, a faint scent of leather and pine air freshener. He opened the door for me, old school manners, and waited until I buckled in before closing it gently. The drive to Miami International was slow, clogged with post-storm traffic, utility trucks, National Guard Humvees, families hauling trailers north. Jack didn't fill the silence with chatter. He just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting easy. Every so often he'd glance over, checking. "You hungry?" he asked once. "Starving," I admitted. Shelter food was basic. He pulled into a Cracker Barrel off the turnpike. Inside, the smell of biscuits and gravy hit me like a hug. We sat in a booth by the window. He ordered chicken fried steak, eggs over easy, hash browns. I got pancakes, sausage, coffee, real coffee, not the watery stuff from the shelter urn. We ate quietly at first, then talked in pieces. He told me about the ranch, 120 acres of rolling limestone hills outside Fredericksburg, longhorn cattle grazing under live oaks, a creek that ran year-round unless it was a bad drought. "Not much glamour," he said, cutting into a steak, "but it's mine. Built the house myself after I got out of the service, kept adding on over the years." "No wife? Kids?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "Came close a couple times, never stuck. Guess I was waiting for the right fit." His eyes met mine for a second, then dropped back to his plate. I told him about Carlos, how proud I'd been when he graduated FIU, how he'd climbed the real estate ladder so fast, how the grandbaby's pictures on my phone were the only thing that kept me going some days. Then I told him about the call, the hesitation in his voice, the few $100 offer. Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he just said, "Some folks forget the hands that held them up." We made the airport with time to spare. Jack had already bought my ticket, first class, nonstop to San Antonio. I protested. "Jack, that's too much." You think I'm putting Miguel's wife in coach after she lost everything? Not a chance. He handed me the boarding pass. I'll be right behind you. Got a later flight so I could drive you here. At the gate, he hugged me again. Brief, strong. See you on the other side, Elena. The flight was a blur. I slept most of it, head against the window, waking only when the captain announced descent. Below, the Texas hill country unrolled like a painting. Green ridges, cedar thickets, rivers glinting silver in the late afternoon sun. No salt air, no traffic roar, just open land. Jack was waiting at baggage claim in San Antonio, hat in hand, looking taller than I remembered. He took my duffel again, led me to the expedition parked outside. Long drive ahead, he said. About 2.5 hours. You can nap if you want. I didn't nap. I watched the landscape change as we headed west on I-10, then north on smaller highways. Billboards for peach stands, wildflowers still blooming along the shoulders even in fall, pickup trucks with gun racks, and "Don't tread on me" stickers. The air through the cracked window smelled clean. Earth, grass, distant smoke from a barbecue pit. We talked more on that drive. He told stories about Miguel I'd never heard. The time they stole a Jeep in Saigon for a midnight run to a village bar. The night they shared a foxhole during Tet, and Miguel sang Guantanamera to keep them calm. I laughed until tears came again. Not sad ones this time. Fredericksburg appeared at dusk. German-style stone buildings, Main Street strung with lights, the scent of barbecue drifting from Smitty's Market. Jack turned off onto a gravel road marked Harlan Ranch, private. The gate was wrought-ironed with an H welded in the center. It swung open at the press of a button on his visor. The house sat at the end of a long drive lined with live oaks, single-story limestone and cedar, wide wraparound porch, tin roof catching the last pink light. Not flashy, solid, like Jack. Inside, pine floors, Navajo rugs, a stone fireplace. On the mantel, a black and white photo of Jack and Miguel in fatigues, arms slung around each other, grinning like boys. Another of our wedding day, Jack photobombed in the back row, thumbs up. He showed me the guest room, queen bed with a handmade quilt, private bath, window overlooking a meadow where 2 horses grazed. Dinner in an hour, he said. Steak, potatoes, nothing fancy. I showered, hot water that didn't run out, real soap that smelled like lavender, put on clean clothes from my duffel. When I came out, the kitchen smelled like grilling meat and rosemary. We ate on the porch, balancing our plates on our knees, watching the sun sink behind the hills. Fireflies blinked in the dusk. Crickets sang. "Tell me about the girls, your granddaughters," he asked. I pulled out my phone, battery almost dead, and showed him pictures. Sophia's oldest with pigtails, the baby with Miguel's dimples. Jack smiled soft. "They've got your eyes." That night, I slept deeper than I had in weeks. No wind howling, no water rising, just the quiet creak of an old house settling, and, somewhere distant, a coyote calling. The long road home had ended, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone on it. Chapter 3. Healing in the Hills. Fall settled over the hill country like a soft blanket, turning the live oaks bold and the cedar thickets a deeper green. The mornings carried a crisp bite, enough to make the coffee steam rise in lazy curls on the porch, but the afternoons still warmed to the low 70s, perfect for long walks down the gravel roads. Jack's ranch felt like a different world from the humid chaos I'd left behind in Florida. No sirens, no traffic roar, just the occasional lowing of longhorns, the wind rustling through dry grass, and the steady rhythm of a place that had learned to take its time. I woke most days around 6:30, the same habit I'd kept since my nursing days. Jack was already up, boots on, starting the coffee in the big percolator he swore by. I'd pad out in my robe, pour myself a mug, black, no sugar, and join him on the porch swing. We didn't talk much at first. Just watch the sun climb over the ridge, painting the meadow pink and gold. Deer would step out of the tree line, ears twitching, grazing close enough that I could see the white flags of their tails when they bolted. "You sleep okay?" he'd ask eventually. "Better than I have in years," I'd answer. And it was true. The nightmares still came sometimes, the water rising, the wind screaming Miguel's name, but they were shorter now. I'd wake sweating, heart pounding, and Jack would be there in the hallway. No questions, just a glass of water and a quiet, "I'm right here." I started helping with small things. Feeding the chickens. Jack kept a dozen Rhode Island Reds in a coop he'd built from scrap lumber. I'd scatter the feed, watch them peck, and feel useful again. Then the garden, a raised bed patch behind the house where he grew tomatoes, peppers, squash, and a row of herbs. I took it over almost without asking. Weeded, watered, pruned. One afternoon, I found an old packet of cilantro seeds in a drawer, must have been his mother's, and planted them. When the first green shoots poked through the soil a week later, I felt a tiny spark of pride. Jack noticed. "You've got a green thumb," he said one evening as we sat shelling pecans from his orchard. "Better than mine." "I just like seeing things grow," I told him. "After everything died back home, this feels like proof life keeps going." He nodded, cracking a nut between his palms. "It does." Evenings became our time. We cooked together in the big kitchen, his brisket rubbed with salt, pepper, and a little garlic powder, slow smoked on the pit out back. My arroz con pollo with sofrito I made from scratch using his garden peppers. We ate at the long pine table or out on the porch if the weather held. After dinner, we'd sit by the stone fireplace he'd built himself, logs popping, and talk. Really talk. He opened up about Vietnam in pieces, never the whole story at once, like he was afraid it might spill over and drown us both. The monsoons that never stopped, the smell of burning diesel and jungle rot. The night his squad got pinned down and Miguel dragged him to cover while bullets zipped overhead. "Your husband saved my life more times than I can count," he said one night, staring into the flames. I never forgot that debt. It wasn't a debt. It was love for his brother. Jack looked at me then, eyes shining. Yeah, love. I told him my own hard things. The years after Miguel's death when the trailer felt too big and too empty. The way Carlos drifted. Phone calls shorter, visits canceled, excuses piling up like unpaid bills. The night I realized my granddaughters barely knew my voice anymore. Jack listened without fixing, without judging. Just let me speak until the words ran dry. One crisp November evening, we built a fire pit in the backyard, stacked mesquite logs, lit them with kindling he'd split that morning. Stars came out thick and bright, no city glow to dim them. We sat in Adirondack chairs, blankets over our laps, passing a thermos of hot cocoa spiked with a little bourbon. "I wrote you that letter after Miguel passed. Figured you'd never need it, but I kept the P.O. box active anyway, just in case." "Why did you never marry?" I asked, the question I'd held back for weeks. He poked the fire with a stick, sparks drifting up. "Came close twice. First was Linda, a school teacher in Kerrville. Good woman. We dated 3 years. She wanted kids, a house in town. I couldn't see it. Then there was Maria. Met her at a Veterans Resource fundraiser in Austin. Smart, pretty, understood the quiet days when the memories got loud. Proposed on Christmas Eve 5 years back. Big ring, fancy restaurant overlooking the river. She said yes. I felt a small pang. Jealousy, maybe, or just the ache of what-ifs. "What happened?" I asked. He stared into the flames. Wedding was set for June, invitations out, venue booked, but the closer it got, the heavier it felt. Not her fault. She was everything a man could want, but every time I pictured the rest of my life, it was empty. like something was missing. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I called it off, told her the truth. My heart had been waiting on someone else for 40 years, even if that someone never came. I swallowed hard. You waited for me? Not exactly waiting, more like holding space for the possibility, for Miguel's wife if she ever needed a safe place. Tears blurred the firelight. I reached over and took his hand, rough, warm, scarred from barbed wire and old burns. He laced his fingers through mine without hesitation. We sat like that until the logs burned to embers. The coyotes yipped in the distance. A barn owl called from the big oak. "Stay," he said finally, voice low. "As long as you want. Forever, if you'll have it." I looked at this man, gray-haired, steady, carrying the weight of wars and years and unspoken promises, and felt something shift inside me. Not a lightning bolt romance like in the movies, something quieter, deeper, like roots finding soil after a long drought. "I think I already am staying," I whispered. He leaned over, pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead, then my cheek, then my lips, soft, tentative, then sure, like two people who'd waited long enough. We stayed by the dying fire until the cold drove us inside. That night, for the first time, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I slept in his arms, listening to his heartbeat steady against my ear. The hills kept their secrets. The ranch kept healing me one quiet day at a time. And Jack kept showing up, the way good men do when they've loved from a distance for decades. Healing wasn't loud. It was coffee on the porch, hands in the garden dirt, stories shared by firelight. It was realizing you could lose everything and still find your way home. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. Spring arrived in the hill country like a promise kept. One morning in late March, the bluebonnets exploded across the meadows, waves of deep indigo stretching to the horizon, mixed with patches of Indian paintbrush red and coreopsis gold. The air smelled sweet, like fresh-turned earth and wild honey. Jack and I walked the fence line every dawn, coffee mugs in hand, watching the calves kick up their heels and the longhorns graze slow and deliberate. The ranch felt alive again, and so did I. I'd been there 6 months now. The FEMA paperwork had finally cleared, $42,000 after deductions, enough for a small down payment somewhere if I wanted. Insurance from the trailer added another $18,000, but I didn't want to leave. The guest room had become my room in name only. Most nights I woke in Jack's arms, sunlight slanting across the quilt, his steady breathing the first sound of my day. We hosted the veteran support group twice a month now. Jack had started it small, 5 guys from town, folding chairs in the barn, but word spread. By spring, we had 15 regulars, Vietnam vets with 1,000-yard stares, Gulf War guys missing limbs or sleep, younger ones from Afghanistan carrying ghosts in their eyes. I baked empanadas and flan, set out coffee and sweet tea. The men talked when they were ready, about bad dreams, about kids who didn't call, about the VA paperwork that never ended. I listened, poured refills, offered hugs when words failed. One evening, Tommy, the Marine who'd lost a leg in Fallujah, broke down telling how his teenage son wouldn't look him in the eye anymore. I sat beside him, hand on his shoulder. "You're still here," I told him. "That's more than a lot of folks get, and you're not alone in this barn." Jack watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a quiet pride in his eyes. Later, when everyone had gone, he pulled me close on the porch. "You're good at this, Elena. Real good. These men need someone like you, someone who's been on the other side of the waiting." "I just do what I did at the hospital," I said. "Listen, be there." "You do more than that," he murmured. "You give them hope." Carlos started calling more often that spring. At first, the conversations were short, careful. "How's Texas treating you, Ma?" he'd ask. I'd tell him about the garden, the bluebonnets, the way the stars looked at night. He'd laugh politely, then steer to safer ground: the girls' soccer games, Sophia's promotion, a new condo listing he'd closed. I could hear the curiosity under his words, the unspoken question about this old army buddy who'd whisked his mother across the country. Then, one Sunday in April, he got to it. "Ma, Sophia and I were talking. We think maybe we were too hasty last fall with the storm. Our place is bigger now. We finished the guest suite. There's a full bath, a little kitchenette. You could come stay. The girls miss their abuela." I stood in Jack's kitchen, phone to my ear, staring out at the meadow where the horses cropped grass. The offer hung there, the same one I'd begged for in the shelter parking lot. Back then, it would have meant everything. Now, it felt hollow. "That's kind of you," I said carefully, "but I'm happy here." A pause. Happy with some guy you hadn't seen in 40 years? His name is Jack, and he's not some guy. He's family, the kind that shows up when you need him. Carlos's voice tightened. "Come on, Ma, you're choosing a stranger over your own son?" "I'm choosing people who chose me first," I answered quietly. "You had your reasons, I respect that, but I've built something here. I'm not packing up to be a guest in your life again." He got angry then, real anger, the kind that comes from guilt wearing a mask. "This is crazy. You're 64. You need family, not some ranch hand playing hero." I let the silence stretch. "I have family, Carlos, right here." He huffed. "Fine, but when you get tired of playing house in the middle of nowhere, don't say I didn't offer." The line went dead. I set the phone down, hands trembling a little. Jack came in from the porch, saw my face, and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You okay?" I leaned back into him. He offered the guest room. I said no. Jack kissed the top of my head. "You did right. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to treat you like an afterthought." Summer rolled in hot and golden. We hosted veteran picnics on the 4th of July. Brisket, ribs, my homemade salsa that made the guys cheer. Kids from town ran through the sprinklers while their dads swapped stories. Jack and I danced slow in the grass to an old Johnny Cash record on the portable speaker, my head on his shoulder, fireflies blinking around us. One sticky August evening, after the last guests left and the dishes were done, Jack led me out to the porch swing. Fireflies danced in the dusk. Crickets sang steady. He took both my hands in his. "Elena," he said, voice low and sure, "I've waited 40 years to ask this. Marry me. Let's make this official. Fill this house with whatever time we've got left. Laughter, grandkids someday, maybe even a little more chaos. I love you. Always have." Tears came fast. I looked at his face, lined, kind, lit by the last glow of sunset, and saw the boy who'd stood as best man at my first wedding, the man who'd driven across the country to pull me from ruin. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, Jack." He slipped a simple silver band on my finger, plain, no diamond, just engraved inside, "Forever waited." We kissed under the stars, slow and deep, like two people who'd finally found the missing piece. The wedding was small, the way we wanted, late October in the backyard under a live oak strung with fairy lights. Pastor Ramirez from the little Baptist church in town officiated, Jack's friend since high school. Witnesses, Maria, the housekeeper who'd become like a sister, and Tommy from the support group. I baked empanadas and flan, set out coffee and sweet tea. The men talked when they were ready, about bad dreams, about kids who didn't call, about the VA paperwork that never ended. I listened, poured refills, offered hugs when words failed. One evening, Tommy, the Marine who'd lost a leg in Fallujah, broke down telling how his teenage son wouldn't look him in the eye anymore. I sat beside him, hand on his shoulder. "You're still here," I told him. "That's more than a lot of folks get, and you're not alone in this barn." Jack watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a quiet pride in his eyes. Later, when everyone had gone, he pulled me close on the porch. "You're good at this, Elena, real good. These men need someone like you, someone who's been on the other side of the waiting." "I just do what I did at the hospital," I said. "Listen, be there." "You do more than that," he murmured. "You give them hope." Carlos started calling more often that spring. At first, the conversations were short, careful. "How's Texas treating you, Ma?" he'd ask. I'd tell him about the garden, the bluebonnets, the way the stars looked at night. He'd laugh politely, then steer to safer ground: the girls' soccer games, Sophia's promotion, a new condo listing he'd closed. I could hear the curiosity under his words, the unspoken question about this old army buddy who'd whisked his mother across the country. Then, one Sunday in April, he got to it. "Ma, Sophia and I were talking. We think maybe we were too hasty last fall with the storm. Our place is bigger now. We finished the guest suite. There's a full bath, a little kitchenette. You could come stay. The girls miss their abuela." I stood in Jack's kitchen, phone to my ear, staring out at the meadow where the horses cropped grass. The offer hung there, the same one I'd begged for in the shelter parking lot. Back then, it would have meant everything. Now, it felt hollow. "That's kind of you," I said carefully, "but I'm happy here." A pause. Happy with some guy you hadn't seen in 40 years? His name is Jack, and he's not some guy. He's family, the kind that shows up when you need him. Carlos's voice tightened. "Come on, Ma, you're choosing a stranger over your own son?" "I'm choosing people who chose me first," I answered quietly. "You had your reasons, I respect that, but I've built something here. I'm not packing up to be a guest in your life again." He got angry then, real anger, the kind that comes from guilt wearing a mask. "This is crazy. You're 64. You need family, not some ranch hand playing hero." I let the silence stretch. "I have family, Carlos, right here." He huffed. "Fine, but when you get tired of playing house in the middle of nowhere, don't say I didn't offer." The line went dead. I set the phone down, hands trembling a little. Jack came in from the porch, saw my face, and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You okay?" I leaned back into him. He offered the guest room. I said no. Jack kissed the top of my head. "You did right. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to treat you like an afterthought." Summer rolled in hot and golden. We hosted veteran picnics on the 4th of July. Brisket, ribs, my homemade salsa that made the guys cheer. Kids from town ran through the sprinklers while their dads swapped stories. Jack and I danced slow in the grass to an old Johnny Cash record on the portable speaker, my head on his shoulder, fireflies blinking around us. One sticky August evening, after the last guests left and the dishes were done, Jack led me out to the porch swing. Fireflies danced in the dusk. Crickets sang steady. He took both my hands in his. Elena. Chapter 5. A New Forever. A year had slipped by since the backyard wedding under the live oak, and at 65, I woke most mornings feeling like a woman who'd been given extra innings in a game she thought was already over. Sunlight poured through the bedroom windows Jack had installed himself, big, double-hung panes that caught the hill country dawn and turned the quilt golden. I'd roll over, find his arm already draped across me, and listen to his slow, even breathing. Some days I'd just lie there a minute longer, letting the quiet sink in. No wind howling, no water rising, no empty trailer creaking in the night. Just us, the ranch, and the promise we'd made to fill whatever time remained with something real. Jack was up first, always. By the time I padded into the kitchen in my robe, the percolator was gurgling and the smell of strong coffee filled the air. He'd set 2 mugs on the counter, one for him, black, one for me, with a splash of cream the way I liked it. We'd carry them to the porch swing, sit side by side, and watch the world wake up. Deer grazed the meadow edges, calves bawled for their mamas, and the longhorns moved slow and deliberate across the limestone outcrops. "Another pretty one," Jack would say, tipping his Stetson back. I'd lean my head on his shoulder and answer, "Every day with you is pretty." The routine we'd built felt like breathing, easy, necessary, life-giving. Mornings were for the small chores, feeding the chickens. I'd name the hens after my granddaughters, Isabella, Sophia, little Mia, and the roosters after Miguel and Jack, which made us both laugh. Watering the garden, I'd expanded into rows of tomatoes, jalapenos, cilantro, and okra. Jack taught me to mend fence wire with pliers and patience. I taught him how to make perfect tostones without burning them. Afternoons often meant the veteran support group, now twice monthly, sometimes more when someone needed an extra ear. I led the caregiver circle, widows, wives, husbands of men carrying invisible scars. We shared coffee, tears, recipes, and the kind of laughter that comes after crying. You don't have to fix it. Just show up. That's enough. One crisp February morning, Carlos called. His voice was softer than it had been in months. "Ma, the girls keep asking about you. They saw pictures Sophia took last time we visited. Those horses, the bluebonnets. Isabella wants to know if she can ride one." I pictured my 6-year-old granddaughter's wide eyes, the way she'd clung to my leg that first awkward week they came down. "Tell her yes. Bring them when you can." They arrived in March, a long weekend that started tense and ended in hugs. Carlos was polite, a little stiff at first, but the girls ran straight to the chickens, squealing when Isabella scooped up her hen. Carlos watched Jack and me move around the kitchen, me chopping onions for pico de gallo, Jack firing up the grill for brisket, and something shifted in his eyes. Later, on the porch after the kids were asleep, he said it. "Ma, I was wrong. Last fall, when the storm hit, I was scared, busy, selfish. I thought if I kept my life neat, nothing bad could touch it. But seeing you here, happy, useful, loved, I get it now. I'm sorry." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "I know, mijo, and I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to how it was. It means building something new." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Can we come more? The girls need their abuela, and I need my mom." "We'd like that," Jack said from the doorway, handing Carlos a fresh coffee. "Doors always open." They left promising regular visits, summer, Thanksgiving, maybe Christmas. The card they sent after was handwritten from the girls, crooked hearts, stick figure horses, "We love you, abuela and Grandpa Jack." I pinned it to the fridge, beside the framed business card Jack had given me decades ago, the one I'd carried like a talisman until the day he opened his door. Jack and I kept tending the life we'd made. We fished the Guadalupe River on lazy Saturdays, his old aluminum boat drifting under cypress trees, while I read aloud from the Bible or a worn Louis L'Amour paperback. We danced in the kitchen to Patsy Cline on the radio, my head on his chest, his hand steady at my waist. Some nights we sat by the fire pit, stars so thick overhead it felt like you could reach up and touch them. Sometimes, I'd say, a hurricane takes everything so something better can grow. He'd kiss my forehead. "You're my better, Elena." And I believed it. The ranch wasn't perfect. There were vet bills for an ailing horse, fence repairs after a storm, days when Jack's old wounds ached and the memories came loud. But we faced them together. I planted a small rose garden near the porch, red blooms for Miguel, white for my mother, pink for the life we were building. Jack carved a wooden sign at the gate, "Harlan Ramirez Ranch. All are welcome." It felt right. One quiet evening in late summer, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted everything amber, we sat on the swing with sweet tea and watched fireflies blink like tiny lanterns. Jack took my hand, thumb tracing the simple silver band he'd given me. "Regrets?" he asked, the same question he asked on our wedding night. "None," I answered. "Not one." He smiled, that slow, easy smile that still made my heart skip after all these years. "Good, because I plan on keeping you forever." Forever might be shorter now. We both knew the math of 65 and 68, but it didn't scare us. We'd already lost so much, what remained felt precious, earned. I looked out at the meadow, the house lights glowing warm against the dusk, the life we'd stitched together from broken pieces. A hurricane had taken my old world, a phone call had brought me a new one, And in the quiet Texas night, with the man who'd waited decades to love me right, I finally felt whole. Not because everything was perfect, but because after all the storms, I was home.